Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. This is episode number 60, and today is February 24th, 2021. There we go. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about landlords attacking tenants, tenants threatening landlords, remediating damage from a flood. We're going to answer some questions from housing providers around the country and so much more. Before we get into that, we're going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager are live every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page. You can catch the replay over on YouTube the same day. We do try to get those uploaded the same day. You can also catch the replays on our Facebook page as well. Last but not least, don't forget about our Instagram over at instagram.com/ownbuffalo. There is a new episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast this week. New episode drops tomorrow. We're going to be taking a look at coin-operated laundry and rentals, renovating an apartment with a tenant still in place, and discussing the purchase of a home when you know it already has troubled tenants. Don't miss out on that. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every other Thursday. And that means that tomorrow will be the new episode. That'll be available anywhere podcasts are heard, as well as over at rentprep.com/podcast. All right, let's jump into the news of the day. We're going to start with this story out of Albany. We're going to preface this by saying that this is not how landlording should work, and you'll understand here as we get into it. Police, Albany landlord tied up and evicted sleeping tenants, dumping them in a cemetery. So this is reported by the Times-Union out of Albany. We're just going to jump right into the story here. An Albany landlord has been charged with kidnapping after allegedly tying up two tenants with zip ties and tape, placing pillowcases over their heads, and driving them at gunpoint to a rural cemetery in Columbia County, where he dumped them in snow before dawn on Sunday, according to law enforcement sources and police records. The landlord, 48-year-old Sean Douglas, allegedly was armed with a firearm throughout the incident and may have received help from two other suspects, according to police records. No other arrests have been reported. The alleged kidnapping unfolded between 1 and 8 a.m. on Sunday. The incident began at the multi-unit Grandview Terrace residence, where Douglas had said his two tenants have resided in the city's south end. Douglas, who police records indicate had been arrested previously on charges ranging from assault to violating an order of protection, has owned the property since 2006, according to the property records. The tenants were a 21-year-old woman and a 32-year-old man, and they could not be reached for comment. Douglas had apparently grown frustrated because he had been unable to evict the tenants due to COVID-19 restrictions, law enforcement sources said. The tenants were both sleeping at the time that he is accused of attacking and tying them up. The 32-year-old male tenant was allegedly punched and kicked by Douglas and two others before being tied up. Police reports on the incident do not provide any details on the other suspects. After the man and woman were bound, Douglas allegedly loaded them into what they told police was a Dodge Durango. With the help of two other unidentified suspects, they drove the man and woman to a motel that the victims told police may have been in Colony. From there, they were driven to the isolated cemetery in Ghent, a rural town in Columbia County, about 35 miles southeast of Albany. Police reports indicate Douglas left them tied up in the snow-covered cemetery and drove away. The woman was able to untie herself and walk to a nearby residence to summon help. By allegedly leaving the pair tied up and abandoning them in wintry conditions, Douglas did expose the victims to risk of serious physical injury, a police report states. He was arrested Monday afternoon and arraigned on charges of second-degree kidnapping. He would be held at the Albany County Jail on Tuesday afternoon on $50,000 bond. So I think that we're all pretty much on the same page here that this guy is not the type of person that belongs in this industry. I understand that there's a lot of frustration with landlords right now. There's a lot of frustration with tenants right now too. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But obviously this is not the right way to go about doing things. There's self-help evictions, which are obviously illegal in New York. And then there's this, which is just absolute insanity. We've seen a lot of stories about landlords being attacked, about real estate agents being attacked when showing homes, things like that. Obviously, it does go both ways. This is a good example showing that it goes both ways. And this is the type of behavior that's just completely unacceptable in a landlord-tenant relationship or any relationship. This is just not okay. I'm not going to go too much further into this. I wanted to highlight this article because I think it's important to understand that there is a lot of stress out there right now on both sides of the field And I think that we need to find a better way of dealing with it rather than tying people up and throwing them into a snow-covered cemetery. So that's my hot take on that one. I'm pretty sure you guys are not going to disagree with me, but that's where I'm at on that news story. Our next story comes to us from Housing Wire. This one is interesting for larger landlords as well as property management companies. Redfin makes its big rental play with RentPath acquisition. Brokerage says the acquisition doesn't mean it will bring on rental agents in 2021. And again, this was published by Housing Wire, so we'll jump into this. It looks like RentPath will be sold after all, after a deal to be acquired by CoStar Group fell through due to antitrust objections from the federal government. Real estate brokerage and listings portal Redfin has scooped up the Atlanta-based rental platform. Seattle-based Redfin has agreed to pay $608 million in cash to acquire RentPath, though the deal still requires sign-off by the Federal Trade Commission and a bankruptcy court. It's only the second acquisition Redfin has made since its founding in 2004. Despite RentPath's baggage, namely a $650 million bankruptcy restructuring, Redfin sees big traffic and lead generation potential with the pending acquisition. Over time, RentPath can bolster Redfin's traffic by drawing a younger audience of renters to redfin.com, but also by increasing our stature among homeowners and renters as one of North America's premier real estate sites, the company said in a statement on Friday. Redfin's brand will get bigger, will show up higher for internet searches on Phoenix Housing or St. Louis Real Estate, etc. RentPath, which owns the portals Rent.com and ApartmentGuide.com, saw a significant uptick in traffic in 2020, Redfin CEO Glenn Kelman said in a statement. RentPath has more than 20,000 apartment buildings on its rental websites and grew its traffic more than 25% last year. We can almost double that audience as 1 in 5 of Redfin's 40-plus million monthly visitors also want to see homes for rent. Together with RentPath, we can create an online destination for every North American to find a home. Redfin drew an average of more than 40 million monthly visitors in 2020, while RentPath properties saw 13 million visitors in December 2020. The real estate tech company believes there is synchronicity in acquiring RentPath. We estimate that 10 million of Redfin's 40 million monthly online visitors may also be interested in renting a home, the company said. Redfin is playing catch-up with Zillow, which said last week in its earnings call that it had more than 200 million unique visitors in the fourth quarter and already has a rental platform. Rental listings from RentPath should be displayed on redfin.com in late 2022, the company said. Redfin said it will prioritize customer acquisition when the deal for RentPath closes. They plan to pilot a program for property managers to pay only for a signed lease. Since signing up new customers, not just revenue, is our first priority, we won't be able to forecast RentPath's financial performance until the two companies can work out a sales strategy a few months after the merger closes. And of course, our long-term project isn't just to get bigger, but to make real estate better for the people buying, selling, and now renting homes. The company said it isn't going to be hiring real estate agents to represent it's not going to be hiring real estate agents to represent agents in 2021, poorly written sentence. It's common for real estate agents to represent renters in only a few North American cities, and we still have thousands of agents to hire for buying and selling homes in 2021, they said in a statement. RentPath reeled in $194 million in revenue in the 12 months that ended on September 30th, 2020. Redfin, which also operates as a brokerage as well as an iBuyer, brought in $875 million in revenue during the same period. CoStar, which itself had been making waves in the residential data space as of late, agreed to pay $587.5 million to acquire RentPath back in February of 2020. The deal fell apart after the Federal Trade Commission filed a lawsuit in fall 2020, expressing concern about CoStar having a monopoly on the rental space. So this is an interesting article. As I'd mentioned, if you are in the property management field or if you have a larger portfolio of rental properties, this could be something that has a bigger impact on you. It's interesting to see Zillow obviously moving into the rental space, Redfin moving into the rental space, and you have to wonder, does it create a situation where property management becomes less relevant because you have these technology platforms and things like that? And I would answer that question and say probably not, because you still have a need for boots on the ground in some capacity to handle things that need to be handled. In addition to that, there's a tremendous amount of legislation, and especially like in the last year, there's been a tremendous amount of legislative change that's very, very difficult to stay on top of unless that's basically your full-time gig, is just paying attention to stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I do think that these big tech companies, especially now that they are gathering more and more data, are certainly going to have an edge over small brokers, boutique brokers, really any broker. I mean, when you're talking about a company the size of Redfin or a company the size of Zillow, they have a lot of cash at their disposal to fight off attacks from smaller brokers or boards of realtors or whatever the case may be. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the course of the next couple years. I have a feeling that we're going to see some pretty drastic changes in how things operate. So that's enough of the news for the day. Let's take a look at some humor. This is a Peekaboo ICU type situation. I think I pulled this one off of Rob's Facebook page. Rob is one of our home inspectors, and he was the one who they started doing sewer cameraing recently, and I think that this was not one of his sewer cams, but just goes to show you that you never know what might be crawling around in your sewer lines. If you hired these guys to do work for you, you might want to reconsider it. I think my favorite part of this photo is the fact that the guy is standing on the I don't even know if he has it really strapped down all that well. The guy who's standing on the ladder there, what a terrifying sight that is. This is why we talk about making sure that you have good quality insured contractors and that you're named as an additional insured when you have somebody doing work on your property, because this guy's obviously going to fall at some point. So yeah, definitely make sure that you're taking care of making sure that you have your contractors lined up properly before you jump into any sort of a home renovation situation like that. Let's jump into our questions from housing providers around the country. This first one, actually all of these today come from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. You can find that group over at facebook.com/groups/rentprep. It's a great opportunity. It's a free networking resource. Good opportunity to hop into a group. If you have questions, you're not sure how to answer them, probably somebody in that group is going to be able to help, because it's coming up on 12,000 members all around the country. Everybody's got a little bit different experiences. So if you have questions, you might be able to find answers right there in that forum, facebook.com/groups/rentprep. All right, on to our first question. Someone died in here? Would you buy a house that an owner died peacefully in? The house is priced well below market and has great bones. We would plan on putting in new floors, paint, cabinets, etc. As I understand it, we would need to disclose the death for 3 years to tenants. We would rent below market during that period of disclosure. Unusual situation I never thought I'd be in, but the house across the street with the same floor plan, albeit in much better shape, is valued at $750,000, and this home is valued at $500,000. Edit to add, we are in California, and per the law, it must be disclosed to renters too. So this is one of those things that if the deal is good, I would still do the deal. No questions asked. We would certainly do the deal. The fact that someone passed away in the home is more or less irrelevant to us. Keep in mind that our housing stock here in Western New York, like when you're talking City of Buffalo and some of the surrounding suburbs, you're talking about properties ranging anywhere from the late 18 to early 1900s all the way up through new build. So the chances are in some of those older properties, yeah, somebody has more than likely passed away at some point. So it's not something that we put a lot of stock into when we're analyzing a deal, at least here in Western New York. If the deal is good, I would still do the deal. So moving forward is to the disclosure side of this. In New York, we don't actually have a duty to disclose death inside of the property when renting or selling. Every state is a little bit different on what you're required to disclose and what you're not required to disclose. So you're going to want to look into the laws for your state before you make that determination. There's something weird in New York. If, for example, we don't have to disclose death in the state of New York, but you do have to disclose if you think your home is haunted, and you disclose it to the public at large. So like if you had, I can't remember the name of that show, Ghost Hunters or Paranormal Activity or whatever. If you had them come in and do an episode about your property, that's obviously making the public aware of the fact that there may be paranormal activity at the property. And at that point, you're actually required to disclose that. So if you're curious about that, that case is from 1991. The name of the case is Stambovsky versus Ackley, if you want to dig into that. So, different states have different disclosure laws. If you have to disclose the death in the property, make sure that you're doing that to stay compliant. If you don't have to disclose it, I guess it's up to you at that point. Honestly, even in the properties where we know that we have had deaths, we don't make that disclosure. Usually one of the neighbors clues somebody in shortly after they move in. But it's never really been an issue for us, at least here in our market. So just understand that your market may be different. You may have to disclose. There are different disclosure rules in different states. So just keep that in mind when you are renting. Tenant threats. If a tenant calls and leaves terrible, possibly threatening voicemails, swearing, name calling, etc., after a pay or vacate notice is received, what do you do and what are your options to set boundaries and ensure it's well documented in case of future threats? Asking for constructive options to improve the process and best practices, please. So there's a big difference between somebody calling you and swearing up a storm and somebody legitimately threatening you. There's a pretty substantial difference there. There's a line that has to be drawn. So thinking of it from that perspective, if it's just the former, if the tenant's just calling you and screaming at your voicemail or swearing at you on your voicemail or swearing at you on the phone or whatever the case may be, at that point, just document it. Keep the copies of the voicemails, keep the text messages, keep the emails, etc., and don't engage on it. Basically, what I'm saying is if a tenant calls and they have like an emergency maintenance concern or something like that, certainly act on that, but don't sit and engage with them if they're going to, sit there and swear at you and everything else. I do recommend having an attorney represent you on that eviction case when you get to that point, simply to separate yourself from the situation a little bit. Again, keeping it a little bit more arm's length will help you get through the situation, I think. It's just nice to have a little bit of distance between you and the tenant, especially when things are as heated as they are right now. If it's a legitimate threat, like if the tenant is threatening bodily harm or saying, I'm going to come kill you, or I know where you live, blah, 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 something along those lines. If they're legitimate threats, at that point, you need to contact the police department and have a police report filed. Maybe look into some kind of an order of protection or a restraining order or something like that. This, again, adds more documentation to your case when it is time for you to appear for the eviction. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You don't have to tolerate a tenant threatening to cause you bodily harm or threatening to, whatever. You don't have to take that. That's certainly something that you should contact the police department about. It will result in a police report at a minimum, and you'll get some additional documentation. Remember, the situation that you're going through right now, it's certainly stressful on you, but it's also stressful on your tenant. Your tenant may just be lashing out at you because they really don't know what else to do. I think that we talked about it during our news segment. We had talked about it. I think a lot of people are coming to the end of their rope and just trying to figure out what their next steps are. It sounds like the tenant here is at the end of their rope. I mean, they're in the process of being told they have to, move out of their property and things like that. Everybody is highly stressed given the current situation, given the pandemic, given everything that's going on. It's stressful on both sides of the coin. So I'm assuming the tenant's probably just name calling and swearing at this point. Hopefully it doesn't escalate past that. But if it does, at least now you have a little bit of knowledge. You're a little bit better armed as to how to handle that situation moving forward. Accounting and Section 8. Good morning, Rent Prep team. I have a question in regards to 1099s and Section 8 housing. I am a property management company. I will be taking on properties that have a few Section 8 tenants. What is the typical for 1099s? Do you as the property management company receive these, or does the actual property owner? Thank you for any insight that you can give me. I've seen it done both ways here in our market. Our preference is for Section 8 to 1099 our management company because we're the ones receiving the rent into our bank account. And then we turn around and 1099 the owner at the end of the year for the entirety of the rents received, including the Section 8 rent. Some of the agencies in our area will do that. Some of the agencies require the 1099 be delivered to the named party on the deed. So in that instance, we pass that 1099 along to the property owner with our 1099. We let them know, hey, just so you know, your accountant's going to have to, deal with this on the back end or whatever the case may be. It's on their accountant or whoever's doing their tax prep, whether it's them, whether it's their accountant, whatever. It's on them at that point to sort that out. Typically, what we try to do is get the Section 8 agencies to 1099 our company since they're paying our company, and then we 1099 back out on the back end. We're certainly not an accounting firm here. Obviously, talk with your accountant before you make any changes having an impact on your business such as this. But that's the way that we do it. There are instances where they do require us to 1099 the owner directly. I'm sorry, where the Section 8 agency will 1099 the owner directly. It really just depends on how the agencies are set up, what their policies are in your area. It's the best I can tell you on that one. So I've seen it both ways. Be prepared to handle it both ways, because you may find one agency works completely differently than another. And that's certainly what the case is here in Western New York. So good luck with your new tenants and good luck with your new client. Last but not least, post-flood remediation. My single-family home rental property had a busted pipe in the attic. There was water dripping from the ceiling and coming out from the walls. The water flooded the floors. The floor has tile, carpet, wood, and porcelain. The tenants cleaned up as much as they could. However, I'm concerned about mold forming, as I can still see water under the wooden floors. Is there anything else that I should be doing to keep tenants safe? So this will tie back to our conversation last week about everything that was going on with Texas and the flooded pipes and broken pipes. I'm sorry, flooded houses and broken pipes, things of that nature. They had that massive freeze down there, all that snow. They were not prepared for it because Texas, you know, it's just not something that they experienced. And there was just a huge, huge amount of damage done as a result. So based on what I'm seeing in this post here, I'm thinking this person likely needs to file an insurance claim. The first thing the insurance company is going to do is ask if you need a water remediation company, which you do. You need to have a professional flood remediation company come out and deal with this situation. They're going to come in with the large commercial industrial, you know, dehumidifier units. They can open the walls up as necessary, ceilings, you know, remove flooring if necessary. Whatever it takes to get the place remediated from the flood damage, they can at least get that portion of it done. And then your insurance should be kicking in so that you can get the home built back to what it was, you know, built back to what it was, essentially. So this sounds to me like it should be an insurance claim. I don't know. It's not clear if you filed an insurance claim yet or not, but it looks to me as though the insurance claim is the route to go on something like this. This is not your tenant's responsibility to handle this cleanup. This is well beyond. This is a landlord responsible type item at this point. It sounds to me like the busted pipe probably caused quite a bit of damage. It sounds to me like you definitely need to be looking at an insurance claim on this. I would personally recommend looking at insurance claim on this, or if you decide you don't want to go with the insurance claim, at least have a professional flood remediation company come out, because they'll be able to go through all the steps to ensure that you don't wind up with, you know, mold and mildew and stuff like that growing inside of your home while you're dealing with all of the other repairs. So that pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of the Ask a Property Manager show. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can certainly help us to improve. Do us a favor and drop a question or a comment either here on Facebook or over on YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to your day, do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on March 3rd, that's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.